Mental Telepathy by Edgar Cayce. Mind reading or mental telepathy does exist. We know that. We experience it ourselves every day. Many of us have had the experience of thinking about someone, and that person calls us on the phone. Again, we may have been speaking about certain people, and they walk in the door. This kind of thing happened to me just a few days ago. We were discussing a subject. As far as I knew, there was no reason on earth for the person involved to come to my home, but as we were speaking of him and his abilities, it happened that he appeared right then. What caused this? What caused this? Was it chance, just an everyday occurrence, or was it that the thought vibrations between our minds and his mind brought about the conversation? My experiences have taught me that practically every phase of phenomena may be explained by activities of the subconscious mind. First, let me tell you one of my own experiences along these lines, I have never an experiment I have never repeated. In telling you why not, I can give you my ideas as to how mental telepathy should and should not be used. While I was operating a photographic studio, a young lady was working in my studio who was really a musician, yet she had become interested in photography and in the phenomena as manifested through me. We had many discussions about the various phases of these phenomena. One day I said to her that I could force an individual to come to me. She said it was impossible, and I told her I would prove it to her. I said this because I had been thinking about the subject and studying it. I felt that I had an inkling of what this great force was, the subconscious mind, which we had been discussing. I believed that one should be able to hold mental images within oneself by deep concentration, and by seeing another person doing a thing, one could mentally force that person to do it. The young lady said, "Well, I believe most of the things you've told me, but this one thing I do not believe. You'll certainly have to show me that." "All right," I said. "Who are two people you consider it would be impossible for me to influence?" "You couldn't get my brother to come up here," she said, "and I know you couldn't get Mr. B to come here either because he dislikes you." I told her that before 12 o'clock the next day, her brother would not only come up to the studio, but he would ask me to do something for him. And the next day before 2 o'clock, I told her, Mr. B will come here. She shook her head and said she couldn't believe anything of the kind. Now, our studio was so arranged that from the second floor, we could look into a mirror and see what was going on in the street below. At 10 o'clock the next day, I came in and sat down. I sat in meditation about 30 minutes just thinking about the boy, yet I wondered if perhaps I hadn't overstepped myself in saying he was going to ask me to do something for him, because his sister had told me that he didn't have any patience with the work I did. After about half an hour of this concentrated thought, I saw the boy pass on the street below, then turn and come up the steps. He stood there for a few seconds looking up the steps, then walked away. In a few minutes he turned in again and came up the steps to the second floor. His sister looked around and said, "What are you doing here?" The boy sat on the edge of the table, turning his hat around in his hands. Then he said, "Well, I hardly know, but I had some trouble last night at the shop, and you've been talking so much about Mr. Casey, I just wondered if you couldn't help me out." His sister almost fainted. The next day, at 11 o'clock, I took my seat in the same chair. The girl said, "I guess you can work it on Mr. B if you worked it on my brother." I told her I wouldn't be in when Mr. B came because he disliked me so much, and that he wouldn't know why he had come in. She told me afterwards that he did come about 12:30 after I had gone out. She asked him if she could do anything for him. He said, "No, I don't know what I'm doing here. I just came up," and walked out. Now, to my way of thinking, these are examples of mental telepathy, or mind reading, but they show a forcing of yourself upon someone else. That's dangerous business. It pertains to the black arts. It's one of those things none of us has a right to do unless we are very sure of what we are doing and of our motives. Sometimes it might be used well, perhaps at times to control our children in that way. Yet even then it might be dangerous for, as our information says, anyone who would force another to submit to his will is a tyrant. Even God does not force his will upon us. Either we make our will one with his, or we are opposed to him. Each person has an individual choice. Then, what part may mental telepathy play in our lives? That is the big question. For anything good can also be dangerous. I would mention nothing good but what it also I could mention nothing good but what it also has its misapplication, its misuse. How then may we use mind reading or mental telepathy constructively? The best rule I can give is this: don't ask another person to do something that you would not do yourself. The Master never asked such a thing, and let us never ask it. When the Master went down into Judea, he was asked by one of the noblemen of the district, a Pharisee, to have dinner with him. He accepted immediately. Did he ask who the man was, or why he had asked him, or why this opportunity was being offered him? We answer, no, because he knew these things. Certainly he knew. So should we too know things within our inmost selves. And why should we know things within? We should live right within our inner selves, so that we know each contact we make is an opportunity to speak according to what we represent from a spiritual standpoint. So Jesus accepted this invitation to dinner, and his disciples went with him. As they sat at the table, a woman of the street came in and washed his feet with tears and wiped them within the hair of her head. She also anointed his feet with precious ointment. The nobleman thought to himself, as many of us would today, what kind of man is this? Doesn't he know the kind of person she is? Jesus, knowing what was in his mind, said, Simon, I have somewhat to say unto thee. There was a certain creditor which had two debtors. The one owed 500 pence, and the other 50. And when they had nothing to pay, he frankly forgave them both. Tell me, therefore, which of them will love him most? Simon answered and said, I suppose the one to whom he forgave the most. And he said unto him, Thou hast judged rightly. That's from Luke chapter 7, verses 36 through 50. Note that Jesus did not say to Simon, This is what you are thinking about, nor accuse him of being discourteous, in that Simon did not provide water for his feet, nor oil to anoint his head. Jesus simply spoke in such a way as to awaken in Simon the realization that he should not find fault with another. At times, then, we too are able to sense what people are thinking, and we may know the trend their thoughts are taking. At such times, our conversation and actions towards them can be such as to show, even as the Master showed Simon, that the inmost thoughts can be known to those who are closely associated with the divine. We hear a great deal about people acquiring mental powers. The advertisements say, be a strong man, control others by your powerful mind. But it's dangerous business trying to control any other person so that he will do your bidding. To influence someone mentally, just as we would in his presence, so that he does God's bidding and comes to know light and truth, that's different. Did you ever pray for a person? Did you ever get down on your knees and pray to God that someone's life might be changed? That is using mind power or telepathy properly, for the force that changes must be from the divine source. Since that first experience of mine in the studio, I have had others of the same kind. I have tried to demonstrate to people the power of mind, but as I studied these matters more and more, I decided never to do such a thing again. Anyone who wants to control another person can do it, but beware. The very thing you wish to control in the other person will be the thing that will destroy you. It will become your Frankenstein. Many of you have studied something of the history of Atlantis. Know that such mental Many of you who have studied something of the history of Atlantis know that such mental forces were highly developed there. Numbers of people were able to think with such concentration that they could bring material things into existence by the very power of their thought. To use such forces for selfish purposes as they used them can result only in evil. The greatest sins in the world today are selfishness and the domination of one individual will by another will. Few people have the desire to or will allow other individuals to live their own lives. We want to tell them how. We want to force them to live our way and see things as we see them. Most wives want to tell their husbands what they can do, and most husbands want to tell their wives what they can and cannot do. Have you ever stopped to think that no one else answers to God for you, nor do you answer to God for them? If a person will seek first to know himself, then the ability to know another's mind will come. Most of those who will practice it for just a little while can develop along this line, but be sure you don't attempt to do God's work. Do your own and you'll have your hands full. It is your business to make your own path straight, not another's. The straight and narrow path leads directly to Him, by your own manner of living, not by trying to control. The force of mind exists, just as it did in ancient Atlantis. What happened when the Atlanteans attempted to use that force selfishly? Destruction. For these may be destructive forces. We all have this mental ability. We can all train ourselves to use it to force others to our will, but we have no moral right to do this. We have the right to tell people our own personal experiences and let them decide for themselves, but not to force them. For God calls upon every man everywhere to look, to heed, to understand. When we use the forces within to serve the creative forces and God, then we are using them correctly. If they are used for our own selfish interests, they are being abused. Then we become even as the son of perdition, call him whatever we will. This is from February 15th, 1931.